as an adult or a grown up and you're trying to learn the language, you have to be passionate about it. Like to get to that level, just in general for any topic in learning, you have to be focused on it, and your mind has to think, hey, this is relevant and important, and I really like this, for it to stick. Otherwise, you're not gonna learn it. It's not gonna stick in your head.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm here again with John, my German contact. Today we're going to be talking about languages a little bit and his process and what he went through in learning German, and maybe some advice for people who are trying to learn this language, or any language really. So, John, you studied German in college, yeah?
Eventually, yes. Yes, I did. Ended up getting a degree in German language and literature. Yeah.
Okay, so what was it that kind of made you go, okay, I'm going to start studying German, like over all the other languages you could have picked?
Yeah, it was actually completely random. So I was living in Argentina and I spoke Spanish, and I was really interested in languages. So I had a permanent residence in Alabama, and so the college that I could go to study language would have been the University of Alabama, and they only offered bachelor's degrees in, I want to say, French, Spanish, and German at the time. I don't know what they offer now, and so I knew Spanish, and I actually kind of knew a fair amount of French too at that point. And Spanish and French are fairly similar. They're Romance languages. And so I was looking to learn a new language, and so I thought, okay, well, let me just try German. And I wasn't even sure I was going to get a German major at the time or anything. I just wanted to study a language. So I went to the University of Alabama in the summer and took a German language class and kind of fell in love with it, and had so much fun. I was like, well, I guess I'll just major in this.
So what is it that was attractive about German then? Okay, I guess what I'm getting at, was it the culture that attracted to you? Was it the interesting literature that you could read, or what was it that kind of pushed you that way? Yeah, actually for me at the time, it was linguistics. So I guess I'll take a step back and say, I thought I wanted to study linguistics in general in grad school. That was kind of my general thought. So I thought in my bachelor's I would study languages and literature, have a good time. Then in grad school I'll study linguistics. Because languages had interested me for a long time. But it was a completely different experience, and I think the difficulty of German is actually what attracted me to it in the beginning. Because when I learned Spanish, I was pretty young. Actually, I was like 15 or 16. And so at that point in my life, I learned Spanish by just talking to people who spoke Spanish. Does that mess you up grammatically?
No. Well, when you're that young, I feel like it doesn't. So your brain just kind of absorbs the grammatical structure, and you just learn the language kind of. So that was a completely different experience learning Spanish, in that you just kind of listen to language, talk to people, and then you learn it. And then going to German, I kind of tried to do that, and it helped a lot, but it was a much more difficult process, because by the time I started learning German, I was 20 or 21, I want to say. And I could definitely tell the difference from 15 to 16, the way your brain is with languages, to 20 to 21. I could tell it in my head, because it was like I've still got an accent in German and all that kind of stuff. Like,
yeah, I was going to ask you that too. Is like, how difficult is it making those sounds? Like, because a lot of people from certain countries who move to the United States and learn English, they always carry with them an accent, even if they moved pretty young. Like, they'll always still have an accent. And I think it's just difficult for certain tongues to make the noises and the sounds and sound like a native. Yeah. So going from American English to German, is that difficult to make those sounds that make you sound native? Is it like harder than maybe an easier language, like a Spanish or something?
I wouldn't say that. I would say, my personal opinion, at least on me, in sample size n equals 1, would be that if I learned German with 15 or 16, I wouldn't have an accent in German. Right. And if I learned Spanish with 20 or 21, I would have an accent in Spanish, So I think a lot of it is just sort of your brain developmental level. And once it kind of consolidates the neurons in that structure, then you can't get rid of some of the accents and stuff, But in general, I think the German accent itself is not that difficult, actually. It's very similar to English in the way you speak. The hardest thing for Americans is always the R, though. By far, is the R.
Can you say the R?
I can say it, but I've still got an accent with it, and it sounds like there's a couple hard sounds. So if you were to do like ich bin, blah blah blah, that's like I am whoever. If you were to say that, that's hard for a lot of Americans. And then the other sound that's really hard is R. So if I were like der, and like an American pronunciation would be like dare.
Yeah, I'm not even going to attempt to say it right now. Okay, so Germany or German on the scale of difficult languages coming from English speaker. Yeah. Where would you say that kind of falls? Because now you've studied a lot of languages.
Yeah, I was super.
You can speak several, and even now you're starting to learn some of the more difficult Asian languages like Japanese, Chinese. Yeah. So where would you say German kind of falls on that scale of difficulty?
Okay, so I think I should maybe take a step back and say all the languages I studied and when. So Spanish was the very first, like 15, 16, got really fluent in that, loved it. When I was also in Argentina, I started studying French and Portuguese. I kind of, because I had a friend and I talked to him in Portuguese and some stuff like that, and would listen to the Brazilian Portuguese radio. And then I met some other people from France, and so that started getting me interested in French. And I would say all those languages I studied, Portuguese and French, I studied a little bit, and it wasn't too difficult to be able to understand at least what they're saying, coming from already knowing Spanish. So I studied that, and that was way back when I was young, and to this day, I can still understand Portuguese pretty well, and French pretty well, and kind of get by. Then, when I started studying German in college, that was another very difficult process. A Germanic language, much different in terms of the aspects of it that are difficult. A lot of the gender stuff is very difficult in German, or was for me at that time. And so I studied German, and then I also studied Japanese actually when I was in college, way back then, and Swedish. So Swedish was interesting because I learned Swedish by turning on the Swedish radio. And just listening to Swedish radio and then looking up words I didn't know. So Swedish, for me, was just a mix between English and German. And a lot of the words would either be sort of very similar to English or very similar to German. I feel like if you knew both of those, Swedish would be very easy for you to learn. So that's kind of my experience. Some Germanic languages, a lot of Romance languages. I studied Latin too for quite a while. But, kind of like the origin of all the Romance languages. And then Japanese. And recently, like what you said, I've started studying Chinese a little bit. So your question was, where is German?
Yeah,
German
on that scale
in that scale of everything I've looked at.
Because if you're an English speaker right now watching, you're kind of like, I'm considering between some languages, how hard is this German thing to master, get into? Well,
I should also mention that so a lot of the languages I just studied for interest, like Swedish, I just wanted to see if I could learn a language by listening to the radio. And I picked a really easy language because I kind of knew, I was like, this is similar to English and German, so let me see if I can do it. But to get back to that question, where is German on the difficulty level? I think I mentioned that because I said I also studied Polish and I failed. I really wanted to learn Polish because my wife speaks Polish and her whole family, but I just completely failed. It was too difficult. It was kind of like German on steroids with the genders and the different endings and all that kind of stuff. So where does German place on that scale? I would put it as more difficult than any of the Romance languages, and probably the most difficult of the Germanic languages you can study.
Oh, what's another example of a Germanic?
So other Germanic languages would be like Dutch, or which when I was in college I studied that, and Swedish. Sorry, not Swedish. Swedish, and Norwegian and Danish. So and English is a Germanic language.
That kind of goes along with what I was saying when I was looking into the different challenges with all the languages. It was like the Romance languages were all number one, like easiest for an English speaker, and then German was that next tier of difficulty.
But I would say also, if you look at all the Germanic languages, so the Germanic languages you have English, Danish, like all the Scandinavian, Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, and then Dutch. I would say German is the most difficult of all those, except unless you wanted to learn Icelandic, which spoke about 300,000 people. But
do not want to learn Icelandic. No, it'd be awesome to learn Icelandic. I feel like it'd be super difficult to find a speaking partner or something. You'd have to go to Iceland, basically. Okay, so what is some difficult aspects that you found about the German language in particular? Like when you were learning, you ran into it and you're like, oh man, this is just giving me a headache. Like this is killing me.
Okay, so I remember at the beginning, besides the typical gender stuff, right? So the gender stuff was just always difficult, and it doesn't get easier. You learn rules for it, and that takes care of classes of words. So any word that ends in ung, so like Entschuldigung, those are all feminine words. And then any word that ends in a diminutive, so like Xin, Mädchen, Bällchen, those are all neuter words. So there are some rules that take care of some classes of words, but so you automatically know what the gender is when you hear the word. And that's really important because German has case sort of declensions. So if you're saying a sentence like sitting in the chair, the way you say in the chair is different depending on whether or not it's masculine, feminine, or neuter.
Well, let me ask you this about the masculine and feminine. Does it depict reality? Like if you're sitting in a chair in a masculine way? No. Okay, so it's not. It doesn't kind of tell you anything about what's going on? It's
called gender, but you could also just call it blub. Just the different way to say words. It is associated with, sometimes, something masculine would be a man. Like, Mann is der Mann. That's der is masculine.
What about something to do with a beard? Would it be masculine?
See, I think it's der Bart. So that is actually, I think, masculine, but I'm not sure on it. So a lot of times, this is another thing I do.
If it does do that, like prescribe masculinity to things that are more masculine about men or about something, would you foresee that becoming a hot topic issue with progressivism, being like, oh, we shouldn't prescribe masculinity to a beard or something like that? Do you think people would ever go at the language like that?
No, but it does make it weird in terms of like neutral pronouns. You know how you have the whole pronoun thing for what do you call it? Just bisexual LGBT people that don't want to be identified. It makes it weird in that context because in a lot of situations you have to have a gender, and putting someone with a neutral gender would be, I mean, technically there is a word in German, es, it's like it. But you would never want to call someone it.
Would it be? Oh, it's kind of rude.
Yeah, like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that would even work in German. Even though
prescribing pronouns to people? Would it not just work the same way that it does in the United States? Where, like, instead of, like, when I meet you, I ask you your pronouns, and then you tell me, like, could you do that?
But you'd have to have whole new conjugations for stuff. So it would be like, well, I guess you'd have to do it. So if you say he, and you also have with him, you have that same thing. That's a conjugation. So if you came up with a pronoun, zer, you would have to have like zer and with zerm. Zer.
Oh, if you made up new pronouns.
Yeah. So if you made up new pronouns, you have to also make up all the conjugations. So that would be very complicated.
But you could I can meet you, you identify as a woman, I ask you, you tell me you, and then I just use your woman pronoun.
Yeah.
So it'd be the same as
yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So what are some methods, like when you were going into it, you mentioned it's harder than the other Germanic languages.
Yeah.
What were some methods that you were able to use to become fluent in German?
Yeah, well, I actually didn't study, as you can probably tell, or most people can tell, I didn't study the genders very much at all. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll just follow, if I don't know it, I'll just be like, duh. Which sound a little Dutch or something, and it's not correct.
But people know what you're saying.
Yeah, people know what you're saying.
That's the same. One of the hardest things about in studying Chinese, or one of the hard things, is that they have measure words for everything. So,
yeah.
And then there's like one that's kind of the generic measure word, and it's not proper, but people know what you're saying. So if you don't know like the measurement word for chair, instead of just saying no measurement word because there has to be a filler thing, you can say the generic one.
Okay.
So is it kind of similar to that?
Yeah, it's kind of just like a generic fallback if you don't know it. But actually,
but a native speaker will always use the proper ones.
Always. Yeah, and a lot of times that sucks because what you'll have is you'll have a word, and actually it usually happens to me. So for instance, the word for cable, Kabel. It's either der or das. Der Kabel or das Kabel. And there's some disagreement also about which one that is. So some people might say der Kabel and some people might say das Kabel. But what you'll never say is die Kabel. You would never say that, which is feminine. So what's interesting about that is if you're in a conversation with someone and you don't know, but you say the wrong one, so you would say to say with the cable, you would say mit, so the wrong way would be mit der Kabel. And then when that other person would answer, they'd be like mit dem Kabel. So then you automatically know. Yeah, because otherwise it's like, it would be like saying if I said, I was talking about a girl and I said she's here, or he is here, you wouldn't say he's here. You would say she's here, because that's correct. Yeah.
That happens a lot of times. My Chinese friends who are like not really good at English yet.
Yeah.
They mix up he and she, because in Chinese you just say ta.
Oh yeah.
And ta is he, ta is she, and so they'll be like, he came over and blah blah, and it's a girl they're talking about.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's just interesting. Okay, so how much do you value the learning that you went through in a university versus taking something like a TV show that's in German and watching it, or listening to the radio, or talking to somebody in German? Like, how much of it do you put value on your university studies? Because I know for me, when I first started doing Chinese, it was really hard for me to find like sentence structure, grammatical things on my own. So I just knew tons of vocabulary. So I know like computer, couch, light, lamp, like just a bunch of random things, but not how to put them together in a conversation. Yeah. So it's really difficult without the lesson structure where it's like, okay, here's how you lay out this sentence structure. Here's where this goes. This has to be said before the verb or whatever. So what do you think about that?
Well, I would say I can talk about my experience studying German at University of Alabama. Yeah. There it was very beneficial because I had great teachers. And I think it depends on your teacher completely. But when I started, I had a professor who came in and he made the class really fun. Like he would speak the whole time in German. He was an American guy, but he would come in, speak the whole time in German, really force everyone to speak the whole time in German. And even though this was from day one, and so people didn't even know any words in the beginning, right? But he would use stuff like he would point and be like, das ist blah, blah, blah. Ich bin der Professor, whatever. Right, and he would talk so clearly, and he made it really engaging and fun. And so I think when you're getting started, and he also made it so that by the end of the class you could we sat down and we had a conversation. Now it was about very simple things like, what's your name? What did you do today? What are you going to do tomorrow? What did I write on the table? Things like that, you know. But
you're learning the proper way to say it, as opposed to sometimes you can translate something on Google Translate, and then you go, oh, this is how you say the weather's nice today, but really it's screwed up.
Oh, that's huge, because the way he did it was completely integrative. So you're using it to solve problems every day. And I think that's really important when you start out, is not just learning vocab, but using it to do things, because that makes it stick in your head a lot better.
Yeah.
So if you get a class like that, it's amazing. And then...
I agree.
Yeah.
So here's a question. There's pretty much, what are like the resources you use to when you're learning a language? Like if you were just going to tomorrow decide you're going to learn some new language.
Yeah.
What's like some resources you would go about getting? Because I know there's hundreds of apps. If you just search any language, there's tons of apps on the App Store, websites you can go to, stuff like that. Like, how much do you value apps too? And then what are the resources you use?
Okay, well, my biggest thing with any language is being able to listen and speak it. And so what my number one goal is, because to me that's language. Language is never written first. It's all, or the grammar or anything like that. Language is always spoken and understood, right? Like if you're a baby, your parents are speaking to you, and that's how you assimilate the language and learn it. And you're using it to ask for food, or say I have to go to the bathroom or whatever, and those are your first words. And you're always using it in the context of speaking it and listening and understanding what people are saying. So that's pretty much exclusively what I focus on. And so, like I've already kind of mentioned, it's a lot of radio, listening to radio, and trying to get to that point where you can understand radio. I'm not a fan of TV as much, because TV, until you get really advanced, because what TV does is it lets you just relax, and you don't have to focus on what people are saying to understand what's happening. So what I would do with German is, there was this great blog called Slow German. And she would write, I'm pretty sure it's available online still. And I'm trying to think, I want to say her name was Annika Rubens or something like that. Anyway, what she would do is she would write out her whole little blog in the language, in German. And then she would have the audio, and you could play the audio. And so what I would do is I would sit there and play the audio and read it to make sure I could understand everything. And I would just do that until I could understand everything just by listening to it. And I would memorize the words and everything. And to me, that's helped me learn most European languages, and that's kind of like the most efficient way to get, in my opinion, to get to where you can understand European languages. And then but what you still need is someone who, they can even be at your level, or even a beginner, but where you're just like speaking in the language with them to get the spoken language out of your mouth, and to where you can use it. Because your goal is to, as quick as possible, get to where you can actually have conversations with native speakers and understand what they're saying.
So how far do you think you could get on your own? Like, let's say there's somebody who finds out that the following semester, or the semester after that, they're going to study abroad, and they want to learn the language that they're going to.
Yeah.
But at the moment, they don't have any Chinese friends or any German friends or whatever.
Yeah.
How far along can they get on their own before going to the place? Like, where's that wall you hit that you just can't really get beyond until you're using it with a native speaker or in everyday life?
I would say you could get to where you can get by in that country using that language the whole time.
Pretty quickly?
Yeah, you said a semester, didn't you?
So yeah, like 6 months. 6 months you could do it?
Yeah, no problem. Without being in that country. But here, now
how hard are you going to have to go?
Maybe if it was some language like Japanese or Chinese, some really difficult language for a native English speaker, you would need longer. But for any European language, definitely 6 months is no problem.
Okay,
if you're serious about it. Now, if you just want to do 5 minutes a day, that's not gonna cut it. But if you want to seriously hit it hard, multiple hours a day, 6 months, you got it.
Now, okay, for me, growing up, obviously they make you take Spanish classes in school, and nothing ever sticks. Like, I can't tell you anything in Spanish right now. I can say the word for beer. That's it. And so it's like nothing stuck. I didn't care about it, but I still had to do my homework for it.
Yeah.
But learning a much more difficult language like Chinese, I've been able to get a lot further. And it's because I attribute it 100% to I'm really into the Chinese language. Like, I learn a new character. I'm interested in it. The culture. Like, I really want to. It's not even a chore for me when I'm studying. It's enjoyable. Like, I actually enjoy it. It's like, for me, playing basketball and exercise.
Yeah.
Like, I'm getting a great workout playing basketball, but I never think about getting a workout.
Yeah.
So how much, or can you make yourself just learn a language without that passion for the culture and everything? Or how much of it is this balance between, I'm interested into it, but I'm just going to push myself and make myself go beyond that?
Yeah, so if you're already grown, there's no way you're going to learn the language. If you're an adult, there's no way you're going to learn the language just by not caring and absorbing it. I think if you're a kid, you'll still learn the language if someone's speaking it to you.
Without having to be interested.
Yeah, and even if you don't even care about it, right? But as an adult or a grown up and you're trying to learn the language, you have to be passionate about it. Like, to get to that level, just in general for any topic in learning, you have to be focused on it, and your mind has to think, hey, this is relevant and important, and I really like this, for it to stick. Otherwise, you're not gonna learn it. It's not gonna stick in your head. But one thing I wanted to say, back to your question on the 6 months, how could you get prepared really quickly? So my technique, and I've actually done this for certain things like France. When we went to France, I hadn't had French, I studied it back in college, and then I hadn't studied it for years and years. So I wanted to be able to speak French when we went on vacation and like do everything in French. So, but it'd been like 12 years since I had even listened to the radio in French. So what I did is there's this great course called Pimsleur. It's the Pimsleur method. And what it does is it's just audio tapes that are 30 minutes long. And they start out with a conversation in the foreign language. And then over the course of those 30 minutes, they teach you all the words in that in the dialogue. And they prompt you to say, like for instance, if I was going to teach you the word hand, right? Or like, let's just say hand. Then I would, over the course of 30 minutes, I would say hand. And you would have to think about what was the word for hand and say it. So it's active the whole time. They're constantly asking you questions as you listen to audio, and you're having to train your speech to be able to say it. And that has, for most languages, that has 3 levels, which gives you a total of 90 lessons of 30 minutes. And so if you did a lesson a day, that would take you 3 months. And usually what that'll do is if you do all those to the end, that'll get you to the point where you can, and this is actually something important in languages, but where you can just think of a word and say it and produce it fairly quickly. Like not rapidly like a native speaker, but you're able to have a conversation and not sitting there for 5 seconds before you can say something. And it also gets you to where you can understand dialogue. Because they also, in Pimsleur, they're not going to teach you technical words or anything. They only use the most common words that are in conversation. So that is always kind of my number one go-to to get your listening comprehension and your speaking started, like bootstrapped. Get that up and running. And then you can always supplement that with like what I was talking about earlier, that method of listening to the radio, learning vocab for the radio, and getting your listening comprehension even better and better, And then for the next 3 months, what I would recommend is, because now you're at the point where you can go to someone who's a native speaker and just, if they talk really slowly and you don't understand your word, you're like, what does that word mean? And they can tell you. And then you can write it down and learn it. And so after that point, I would say one-on-one tutor or someone you can talk to on a regular basis in that language is what I would do for the next 3 months. And then you're going to be really, definitely prepared to go live in the country, get by, Oh, one of the things I didn't mention is regular consistency is big, especially in the beginning. You have to do it every day, and the more time you do every day, the better. So one of the things I did, and the thing is, once there's this learning curve at the beginning where you can learn a ton and get a lot better really quick. And then after that point, to get better, it takes a long, long time to see any real improvement. And so I think if you can focus on, like I said, the listening and speaking on a regular basis, and just do as much of that as you can, you're going to see massive improvements. And then you're going to get to the point where you can really enjoy the language and it's not an effort. So you're able to watch movies, you're able to listen to the radio, you're able to talk to your friends in that language, hang out, experience the culture. And that's where it gets really, really fun. So I'm a big proponent of getting through that hard stuff in the beginning and not dragging it out. So go really, really hardcore the first 3 months, 6 months, just soak in, work really hard. And then you're at the point where it's like, okay, everything now is fun. I can just watch movies. I can talk to people in the language,
What about this notion that people always say, like, oh, I just don't have an ear for languages. Yeah. I don't have an ear for languages. He just has an ear for language. Do you buy into that? Obviously people have...
I actually do.
Okay. So go into that.
So, first of all, I'm an immigrant. I've learned a bunch of languages. My wife grew up bilingual. Her family speaks a bunch of languages. So, even friends of mine, So, I have a lot of experience with this. And I would say, based on that experience, what I've observed is there's definitely a talent level difference. So, some people are going to be, the best they're going to be able to achieve is, having a very strong accent and making a lot of grammatical mistakes in terms of, their performance in the language. If you think about speaking the language as a performance, right? And then there's going to be other people who might even be able to get to a level where it's like they have no accent, never make grammatical mistakes. Even listening to them, they sound really articulate, right? So there is that difference that's going to be probably a genetic difference, right? But if you look at it that's in there in terms of their performance. But if you look at how they experience the society, I would say there's very little difference, because between those two people, they're both going to be able to read literature and enjoy it, watch movies and enjoy it, talk and laugh with their family and friends and hang out and make jokes and do all that stuff. Right? So from sort of the experiential perspective, I would say they're the same. Performance, that's where you do notice the genetic differences. I mean,
what about like if you wanted to put it in a time frame, like somebody who's kind of on the lower end of the spectrum versus somebody who's at the higher end of the spectrum? Higher end of the spectrum, he studies really hard. He learns the language in 1 year.
Yeah.
And he's really good. Other person uses the same method, studies really hard. How long would somebody kind of achieve a level of fluency where they can enjoy society like that?
Actually, I don't notice that much of a difference in terms of how fast you can achieve a level. It's just how far you go with it. So pretty much anyone could probably get to that level really quick if they did the same method and had, like, say you had two people with different genetic abilities in terms of, accent, grammatical mistakes, like their performance in the language, right? But they're both like super passionate about the language. They're both studying all the time, learn as much as they can, right? They're going to get to whatever level that they can reach, this kind of the same. Like they're going to know the same level of vocab. You're just going to notice that one of them has a stronger accent, makes more grammatical mistakes than the other guy. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like in a year, they're still both going to be able to carry on conversations, read literature, and do all that, watch movies.
Okay. I think that pretty much covers everything that I had questions for. Is there anything you wanted to say to top it off, or?
All my own opinions.
Okay, yeah. Obviously, John's own perspective. But yeah, thanks for coming. Appreciate you talking with us about languages.
Yeah, man.
I know if there's one person I know who knows anything about learning languages, it's this guy right here. So I appreciate it, and we will see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching. God bless.
Take it easy.